I think the Chinese are pretty cautious. I mean, they may, Philip is saying, they may be feeling, well, we can afford to do this. I still think they're pretty cautious about it because it would cost an enormous amount, either in terms of their own interests being jeopardized. I mean, they would lose export markets all over the place. It would not necessarily be very popular internally.
Read a lot now in sort of geopolitical articles about the crinks, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. And yes, undoubtedly, Philip, over the last few years, we've seen those countries exchanging technologies and supporting each other, principally support Russia in Ukraine. But it's not an ideological alignment. It's just a sort of marriage of convenience. To what degree is the crink a thing as a military force?
I think it's increasing in importance because of the potential threat that it's giving to the West. And this is where we've got a conflict in Europe, we've got a growing instability in the Middle East that could turn into a conflict, and we've got China being expansionist in certain areas in Southeast Asia, which could lead to regional conflict and other bits and pieces. And we're seeing a swapping of military technologies. We're seeing logistic support going around the crink groups that are in there. But everyone's got their different motivations. Vladimir Putin needs more ammunition, needs more technology, needs more microchips, needs more vehicles. What does that say about his defense industrial base that he keeps saying is brilliant and can do anything to defeat Ukraine? He's relying on Iran to supply technology and drones and all the rest of it, North Korea to supply ammunition. Russia's using North Korea and Iran as a backdoor method of not supplying directly so that they don't fall into the game of Russian sanctions. Russia's using it as a way of testing some of their technologies out, but they don't want stuff to go in so obviously in case it fails, and that reduces confidence in Chinese defense manufacturing, therefore Chinese defense exports. Of course, Russian defense exports are going to die completely after Ukraine because their equipment has been proven so poor against Western weapons. So China sees an opportunity there to the countries that don't want to do deals with the West. Iran is sitting there watching very closely, and Iran is taking stuff from North Korea, it's taking support from China, it can sell its oil outside sanctions, but it wants nuclear technology. So that's why it's helping Russia. And it wouldn't surprise me if under the table, Iran is continuously pushing to say, we'll give you even more, we'll give you even more if you give us a nuclear weapon, if you give us nuclear technology. And therefore it's all different motivations. So it's a marriage of convenience at the moment. Whether it'll last or not, I don't know, but they're all thinking much longer term ahead than we are, so that's where it's worrying. And if it does come together, if something gels it like an increased global conflict, then we're potentially in trouble.
And I mean, I think that people like me, actually, I've sort of been on TV cameras over the last couple of years, rather sort of smugly saying to Putin, look, you've compromised all of your most sophisticated land weapon systems. There's plenty in the maritime domain and the air domain that we haven't seen a ton of in Ukraine.
Well, the Black Sea Fleet is compromised that way.
Some ships have gone to the bottom, but in the Northern Fleet, there's still there's still submarines that we've not really dealt with. But in the land domain, things like S-400, which were top secret intelligence, that's the air defence system, top secret intelligence requirement for the West 2.5 years ago, we've now got one that we've kind of taken apart and it's all been compromised. And so we kind of think, well, brilliant, Ukraine is a battle lab for NATO and for the donor community, and we're now advancing our military technology at pace. But so too is Ukraine a battle lab for North Korea,
and China
and Iran.
I
wouldn't be at all surprised if Chinese staff officers weren't in Russian headquarters. That people sort of say rather complacently that the PLA might generate all the mass, but it has no war fighting nous. Well, maybe China is kind of putting itself into Russian HQs in order to sort of gain some of that war fighting experience.
The majority of the UAV technology that we're seeing that are being used successfully by the Russians and Ukrainians are being sourced from China, commercial Chinese sources, and therefore countering that. And I've seen pictures very recently of electronic warfare boxes that have clearly got Chinese antenna and labels on them and all the rest of it. So it is a battle lab.
So where, there's the risk is that this is a sort of 30, 40, 50-year competition a competition, I don't know, between democracies and autocracies, East and West, pick your label. I mean, I think it's quite hard to define exactly what it is, within which a shot may never be fired. It might just be a competition that's played out through votes in the United Nations, or, and who gets to control the world order that exists in 2050. But where, as an experienced watcher of these things, where are the points of crisis that you think could explode this into something hotter?
Gosh, hard to say. Well, obviously the hot wars that are going on at the moment, which have regional implications. I mean, Ukraine, I think, may be contained within Europe. I don't think that's going to spill over into other parts of the world. But I mean, that is a very serious conflict. And the real worry is that it will again become a direct NATO-Russia conflict. I mean, that is what the Americans have been worried about right from the start. And that is why they've had these bans on using weapons to attack deep into Russia itself, because they fear that that would be a provocation that the Russians would respond to. Whether they will respond, I don't think they will respond with even tactical nuclear weapons, because they know exactly where that could lead. But the idea of a direct NATO-Russia conflict is still pretty much limiting the danger of that war spreading. Gaza is a different thing. I mean, Gaza is a very nasty war, lots and lots of people getting killed, potential for huge regional instability and conflict. Surprisingly, the Arab world has been very moderate and quiet in its reaction, partly because they're afraid of the Arab street. They're afraid of a huge uprising, a huge kind of anti-Western, anti-American feeling that the Americans are running this show with arming Israel, and that Palestinians are getting killed in large numbers. But the Arab governments know quite well that if they kind of allow that nationalistic wave to sweep everything aside, they'll end up with the sort of chaos that they saw originally in Iran, and they don't welcome Iranian domination of the region at all. So I do think there is a danger, as always, of a flashpoint in the Middle East spreading out to, Iran and possibly the wider Muslim world. I mean, people forget that there is kind of a large Muslim solidarity that extends even into Western countries. I mean, large Muslim minorities who feel very upset by what's going on at the moment. That is always a potential flashpoint. Then other areas, well, it's more economic competition, or it's the real danger is internal breakdown of law and order, aspirations that can't be fulfilled. Look at, say, South Africa. That is a country that has dismally failed its aspirations. And there is the real worry that sort of organized crime, drug gangs, international drug trafficking, and all that will overtake whole countries, as we've seen perhaps in Ecuador and other places, where these global forces are very difficult to contain by governments, or indeed by responsible international bodies. So there are plenty of potential flashpoints. I don't see a single flashpoint that's going to set off nuclear Armageddon straight away.
Yeah.
Even the Taiwan trigger?
Well, I think the Chinese are pretty cautious. I mean, they may, as Philip is saying, they may be feeling, well, we can afford to do this. I still think they're pretty cautious about it, because it would cost an enormous amount, either in terms of their own interests being jeopardized. I mean, they would lose export markets all over the place. It would not necessarily be very popular internally. And at the moment, economically, they're struggling a bit. I mean, their economy is not in a really good shape. I mean, by comparison with many other countries, they're doing fine. But by comparison with what they've known in the past, it's not doing terribly well. A real problem with property that's gone wrong, a sort of property bust, and various other things. So I don't think, I mean, although Xi has a very elevated view of his own importance, and China finally having its day in the sun, I think they're going to be very careful with Taiwan.
Philip, the Cold War, when it did defrost, it defrosted through the superpowers sponsoring proxies to play out their competition. You can see Russia doing that already. It's sort of part of the Kremlin playbook. But can you see China? I sort of agree with Michael. I think China's very unlikely to fight over anything but Taiwan, and even that is moot. I can't see China directly fighting to protect its interests across the Belt and Road Initiative. But can you see China sponsoring proxies, if its interests are challenged?
Well, I think there's another domain that is being influenced at the moment, which is the biggest flashpoint, and that's our democratic processes and our democratic principles. Because what is happening at the moment is that those are being undermined in the information sphere.
Yes.
And that's been tested by Hamas in Gaza, an organization that cannot militarily beat Israel. They know they can't, but strategically they are really kicking them quite hard with all of the information and the way they're controlling it that's coming out. Vladimir Putin was a past master at it and is still working very hard in the elections and everything else. And we're seeing that in the results of the European elections that have just come out, an increased polarization where people are shifting to the right. But the reality is people are shifting into more extreme pockets. And what will that stimulate in America? This is what China wants. It'll stimulate greater America first and inwardly focus rather than a global focus. That allows China to continue what it's trying to do on a global perspective. So meets their longer term aspirations. So Xi Jinping has been very clever. He's staying in the background. He's not making lots of noise. He's not doing a lot of things. He's being quite aggressive in Southeast Asia, the South China Seas and East China Seas. He's generating brand new Chinese territory out of islands he is artificially creating. That's giving him economic zones to control. Vietnam has just realized that you can do that, and they're trying to counter what China is doing by doing exactly the same themselves. Militarily, China is probably 3 to 5 years off having the optimal military capability it would need to retake or to take Taiwan and then protect the fallout from any Western reaction. So. And again, I agree that China doesn't want to do that because of the economic shock it would suffer, and it's not in a strong enough position to do that at the moment. So, but my biggest fear is this, undermining where we are democratically, because we've got politics by soundbite, not substance now. They recognise that and they're exploiting it.